Hey, welcome to Fireside Technique. My name is Jake, and in today's episode, we welcome our good friend Ty Pallotta back to the show to review the MusoToku Power Supply while simultaneously bashing my Critical Atom power supply. But what he doesn't know about the Critical Atom is it lights up in multiple colors, and it's round, brah. It's awesome. Check out the episode now.
Let's change gears a little bit, get away from machines. Let's talk about power supplies. So what we're doing here is we're converting 120 volts that comes out of the wall, and we're dropping voltage to something that we can control and use in a tattoo machine. So what's the basic function? And let's talk specifically about the MusoToku, because you've been using it a lot recently and been talking a lot about it. We can compare it a little bit to the Critical that I've been using. Dive in on the MusoToku. Tell me what makes it different.
All right. We'll start by saying how I ended up at the MusoToku. Was having several critical power supplies with all the readouts on them for hertz and everything. Mm-hmm. And I had one in my room, one in Robin's room, one in the apprentice's room, and we'd have 3 in the shop. And no matter which machine I hooked up on each different supply, I got a different readout on every single one. My hertz weren't accurate, my power wasn't accurate, the voltage would make one machine run faster on one, even though the same voltage put out would make the machine run slower on the next. And that made me say, how are all these things accurate? And this is supposed to be a machine that's showing me, my duty cycle, my amps, my power, my voltage, everything. How is it running different on hers and hers, or his and mine?
With no
if
other,
I'm talking about
it's
the
the
same
only
shop,
variable that's changing,
and
right?
each booth in the shop
Yeah.
has its own individual breaker for the receptacles in that room. Huh. One doesn't have more power than the other. Why are they all different? Yeah. And what it comes down to with these things is these guys got a lot of bells and whistles. They have their really cool flat touchscreen interface on the older models in the CX2. You've got your digital readout for your hertz and all that stuff. What's different about this versus this? Some people think this looks cool because it looks really industrial. And this looks a little more space age, say. To me, this looks a little more crude, but it's not. The buttons on this thing, even though they're old school buttons, it's an infinite turn pot, and this is a push button. These buttons are way more reliable than these flat buttons here. These things will die faster. But what truly sets these things apart on a MusoToku versus the Critical Atom or any critical power supply is all of the money is spent on the housing on these things, the fancy magnets on the back. They look cool.
They're high power magnets for sure.
Yeah, the high power magnets. Earth magnets are cheap enough for them to be high power. Where these things all fail is the internals. These guys at least tell you what they're giving you. You say on this is less than, but on their bigger supplies, it's a 4 amp maximum peak output. You'll never get near those 4 amps in your life. Those things are 1.5 amp continuous.
What your machine is, these are 1.5 amp.
1.5 amps is all you really ever get out of it.
All
they claim 4 amp peak. You're never going to get 4 amps out of that thing. You're only going to get 1.5. The difference is in the internals. The money is spent on the internals on a MusoToku, which is why you spend more money, and less money on this. This has inferior interior components. This thing has superior interior components.
So
1.5 amps continuous. 5 amps continuous. They claim 4 amps peak. This is 10 amps peak. You can run 2 tattoo machines off of this thing all day, every day. None of them are ever going to dip in power. You can run one off of this thing and see voltage and power fluctuation depending on your wall power, because this doesn't have the extra amperage that you need, because the amps are the power, not the voltage. So this guy is going to give you everything you need no matter what's happening in your wall. This is not.
Yeah. And for people who are confused between amps and voltage, if you think of it as voltage being the potential power, so if you had a water faucet that was turned off and the pressure on the backside of that faucet is at 120 pounds per square inch, that's the potential, and that's voltage. Amperage would be, if you open that faucet, how much is actually flowing. So voltage is potential, and amperage is what you're actually using.
Yeah. And you got more out of this all day long than you'll ever get out of this guy.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they do have all the bells and whistles, the fancy like flat touchscreens, glass interfaces, beautiful digital readouts, but what's inside is shit.
Yeah.
They spent all the money on what you can see and what you can feel versus what you need to feel in your tattoo machine, which is where these guys got it right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in the future, once people are all going to realize how much better this is, when you have one of these side by side in a shop, you may have a guy that goes, "Oh, this fucking thing's cool," or even the other version of this thing where I spin the dial on top and the fucking colors change. Woo!
Yeah.
But this guy, if there's another guy in the shop using this power supply and he runs his machine, that he's having a problem with a rotary machine that fluctuates and it sputters. This fucking machine's a piece of shit. There must be something wrong with the motor. I'm going to send this thing back. Well, if he just walks into his friend's room who's got the MusoToku and he hooks that thing up in his friend's room, that machine's most likely 9 times out of 10 going to run perfect. The problem never was the motor on that machine. It was never the machine at all. It was the power supply. These people need to think about what they're giving a tattoo artist versus what they really need versus what they're looking at, which is what these guys did. And people go, "Oh, this thing's big and bulky." Like, big and bulky? This is like smaller than an iPhone. It's not big and bulky at all. It's not quite as small and compact as this guy.
But you were saying earlier you would love to see the guts of this in this packaging.
Yeah. So if these guys ever were to find a way to give you something as reliable as this infinite turn pot, this thing will last 10 years, 20 years. You know what I mean? You could push this all damn day long. This is going to last you longer than a button on a keyboard on a computer would last you. Same as this button. These are all super reliable, which is why they're analog. These things already, when you feel them and you push them, they're not going to last that long. Eventually you're going to be futzing with them because they don't register anymore. This interface is not nearly as reliable as this interface. I would like to see something like this actually have the ability to work like something like this. Now, if MusoToku was to give you your guts that you're getting in this with the convenience of a flat surface like this thing would probably jump up again astronomically in price.
What's the cost difference between these two? I know this one's around $180. This
is $400, yeah.
About $400.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll keep replacing these every few years. You won't have to replace this thing. This thing's gonna last you a long time.
If you were to see, if you were to critique this in any way, it would be just what the housing.
I mean, for me personally, I would like to see this like strap and all this stuff gone. Even though this is
What's the point of that?
It's a cord management system. You can plug in the power adapter here. Say you have it set up on your station on the mount that they give you. You can, and your power supply's over your wall outlet's over there. You can route the cable out of your way, which is convenient.
Yeah.
But honestly, I would rather have a sealed unit that's a little more like this without the flat interface, even if it has these buttons, something with a little less hard edges on it. These edges on it, honestly, I think just get caught on the bag every time I take them on and off. They do sell a disposable cover for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a flat cover that goes on, and it covers this button. And there's another piece of the cover that goes over the button, so that will give you full turn even with the cover on. And then you throw the whole thing out. Those are super convenient. But I'd like to see it a little bit more water and solution resistant, so that you can wipe it down. Even though you're bagging the damn thing, and it doesn't matter. If you bag it, you never need to clean it. Yeah. If you can afford to do it, because you can see the difference in how your machines run. And especially if you have a rotary machine that's been giving you problems, 9 times out of 10 when you hook it up to a MusoToku, those problems disappear. It's the inferior power supply that can't give that motor the power that it needs to run properly.
Yeah. I will say I've only used this. I came from an Icon 420, I think, that I used for years that got damaged on the way back in a flight recently, and I bought this kind of in a pinch. And so this power supply is maybe 3 months old.
Right.
I've ditched a foot switch and I've gone to this push button foot switch. I rarely get it to turn on and off on my first try. I'm always feeling around to control it. So this, I agree that this interface is junk, and I would imagine within the next year this will already be replaced.
Yeah. Real quick, since you mentioned that, I'll say that the same. I had Icon power supplies. I've had 2 or 3 different Icon power supplies back in the day before I switched to Critical. I probably used Critical for the last 7 or 8 years before I started using this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can't remember when I bought the first Critical. It was a long fucking time ago. And I've already owned 4 or 5 of them. I've had this thing over a year already. I don't even have to be nice to it. Even though I put it in a case, I could drop this thing. I could lug it with me wherever I've gone. I've never had a problem with this, and I'm not going to with these buttons. And you can hear it clearly when you click these things and you turn these things. They are such good quality, and the money is where it needs to be inside this thing. No, you don't have a cool looking fucking machine surface on this guy. You don't have
this
fancy
will turn green
flat
and
buttons.
purple though.
Yeah, green and purple's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I wish we had this. You know what? I have the power to turn this thing on and show you how simple the readout is on this. But the LED display on this thing is so simple and so old school looking compared to what you get on these guys. But it's so reliable. Yeah. You're not going to have any issues with it. Everything that's ramped up in this thing is going to cause you nothing but problems versus something like this that's going to last you and be reliable for you and make every machine you put on it run the way it did from day one. And you put them side by side. Any machine you're having a problem with, run on this guy that you're having a problem with, you put it on this guy. Like I said, it's most likely going to go away. It's just an amazing product. And I've never been behind a product before. I've never been for a company before. But having the problems we did in our shop with Critical and then jumping over to a MusoToku and all those problems just disappearing for the first time in a while, I said, you know what? Somebody's doing something right. It's not all about bells and whistles. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's not polished on the surface. It's in the guts in here. It's the power that's inside this machine and the components that go inside this thing that are going to give you everything you want to do on your daily basis working. You want something that's going to hit the same speed, same strength every time you use it. You're going to get that here where you're not there.
Yeah. Man, I'm sold. I'm going to buy one when the button goes the rest of the way out.